Good afternoon and welcome to Election Bites, bite-sized conversations about elections for your lunch hour. This week we are joined by a wonderful person. I'm so excited she's here. We're joined by Tina Barton, who will be talking to us a little bit about some of the work that she's been doing about safety and security for election officials. Tina is a former city clerk and Electoral Assistance Commission senior program advisor, and now she is the senior election expert at the Elections Group, where she is working on safety and security of our elections and those who administer them. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you, Avery. I'm so excited to be with you today. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we are very excited to hear from you. Could you maybe just start off by telling us a little bit about your background as an election official? How long did you do that work, and what were some of the highlights for you? What made that sort of a career that you pursued?
Well, I actually just wrapped a 32-year career in government, working at various levels, and specifically with the last 16 years of that being dedicated to election administration, working at a township, a city, and then also working for the federal government. As those last 16 years working as an election administrator, I was a city clerk in the city of Rochester Hills, Michigan. And then, as you mentioned, I was a senior program advisor at the Election Assistance Commission at the federal level. I would say probably some of the things that I love most about my job was working with the people and of our community, as well as our election inspectors. You have to love them. These are people who are passionate about what they do. They love government service. They love working on election day. And so I always enjoyed interacting with them, developing those relationships. Many of them do that for multiple years, so you get to know them quite well. And those were certainly highlights of working with them, and then just feeling like you were really contributing to something that was core to our country and core to our foundation of our country, and that's our electoral system and the election, and carrying out these democratic processes that we have in our republic. And so you just felt like you were actually giving back to your country in some way. And so that was something that I always loved about government service, and I would consider those things overall to be highlights of my career of contributing to the local community as well as the country overall.
Thanks, and I think, having spoken to election officials from around the country, I think that some of those themes that you mentioned are also things that they would say. I think it's, a common commitment to our democracy, to service, to our community. That seems to be some of the things that really kind of unite election officials around the country and why they continue to do this job, which, is increasingly difficult. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about what happened in 2020 and how that is now shaping the work that you're doing? Because you have made a bit of a pivot now to focus on a very specific topic.
Absolutely. 2020, as it was for probably most what election officials would say, was one of the most challenging of my career. Certainly, not only were there lots of political atmosphere type situations going on as far as being charged, but we were dealing with a pandemic in Michigan. We were also implementing for the first major election cycle many new election laws. And in November of 2020, I was overseeing the election for the city of Rochester Hills. We had a situation where there was a reporting error that we quickly realized and also quickly had corrected. And we also had made press releases out so that the press and our constituents and the people in our community were aware of what had happened. And so once that was done, honestly, we kind of thought as of Thursday, again, this is 2 days after the election. It was during the canvass period of time where you correct any mistakes that have been made, and that mistake was corrected. And so come Friday, we thought that everybody had been made aware that should be made aware, right? And a press conference was held by a national political figure who stated that they had found 2,000 ballots that should have been given to President Trump that were given to Biden. And that started this national press conference brought then national attention to our community and to me. And so we put forward a response to that particular statement. And within 72 hours of that response, we had received over 1.2 million views on social media of my video response to that. What that also did was just a matter of a few days later, um, I started receiving death threats because of that. And so these death threats started coming through, and the impact that that has on a person, mentally, emotionally, all of these things, physically, all the changes that you're making, the conversations that you're having with family, the things that you're doing to secure yourself, secure your facilities, all of those things. So it made me passionate about how can I help? How can I help other election officials that are going through this, election officials that are dealing with these threats themselves? What kind of a voice can I have in that space, or what resources can I provide to help keep them safe?
Thanks, Tina. And thanks for sharing your story. I know that it's not always easy and you've been asked to talk about it a lot. And so I really appreciate you sharing it one more time, even though I know that it's hard. Um, so I think that's a good segue, though, to talking a little bit about the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections and sort of, your point about sort of serving other election officials. How are you doing that? And what is the committee doing right now in that vein?
Yeah, so the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections, we certainly realized that there was a space that needed to be filled, a gap, if you will, between law enforcement and local election officials, and recognizing that we were in this unprecedented time of seeing these threats towards election officials. And so our committee is about 32 members, consisting of former and current election officials and former and current law enforcement officers, coming together to have collaborative conversations about how we keep those who administer our elections and keep our elections safe and secure as we move forward in this new time or climate, if you will, that we find ourselves in. And so it's having these collaborative conversations about how we provide resources, how do we again put together different training opportunities. So for instance, we just put out a training video that is being shared widely with law enforcement across the country. There are a lot of things that we have collaborated with law enforcement on as election officials, but and we're planners. Election officials are planners, and we're looking at, if this happens, then we do this. This is plan A, this is plan B. And we've done those types of tabletop conversations and things like that when it comes to things that might be like an act of God. For instance, if there was a tornado, or if there was tragedy, if there was a fire in the building or something along those lines. But we haven't had these collaborative conversations of what if some sort of violent activity takes place on election day or prior to election day? What would we do? What would be our plan? Who is going to take command in certain situations? Has everybody shared their phone numbers? Do we know all the parties that would need to be involved in these conversations? And to put together crisis communication plans. And then once we've done that, we've had the conversations, we've come together, we've met, we've shared all of our information, we've agreed on how we would move forward on things, to put these plans together and then to practice them, put them into practice so that we have this muscle memory, if you will, that if something were to happen, we've already talked through what we would do and how we would respond to that. So we're putting out resources as far as paper resources, but we're also putting out training videos for election officials and law enforcement alike.
Those sound like great resources. And I know that there'll be a lot of people who will make good use of them, election officials, but maybe also members, sort of civil society or organizations or folks in the community who want to help election officials as well. Sort of segueing from physical safety and security, we've talked a lot about that, but what else can we do to care for our election officials, care for their well-being and resilience during this sort of challenging time?
Well, as I kind of touched on a little bit earlier, I think it's important to recognize that we're people. We are people. We're humans, right? And this, we're finding ourselves again in a space that we've not been in before. And until you have been threatened, or until you have been intimidated, or attacked in any way, any form, it's hard to really fully understand, I think, not only the impact that it has on you and your family, but the mental and emotional impact that it has on you as a person. And I think there's been a dehumanization that has taken place in our country of election officials where people have forgotten that we're their neighbor next door. We're the soccer mom that we go to the same churches, we shop at the same grocery stores, and we've become the enemy. And this has taken I think, a really a mental and emotional toll on election officials. And I want to applaud the Carter Center for your resource that you've put out over the last year that specifically is dealing with the mental awareness and the mental health factor, helping election officials during this time, giving some guidance and some direction there, and things of recognizing when you're in a state of hypervigilance and knowing what to do and when to talk with someone. And I think that if I could really push for people to understand it's that we are people, we are individuals, we are your neighbors. The elections are ran by people in your local community. These are people that you know, people that you trust, people that you see, and we're the ones running your elections. But we're also people, and I hope that election officials during this time, I've talked to many who have talked about the impact that it has had on them, and a lot of them are walking away from their jobs. We're seeing a real mass exodus in our profession because people can no longer tolerate or take the abuse, if you will, that they've been putting up with for the last 2 years. And so if I could really send a message, it's that we're your neighbor, we're people, we are not the enemy, and we love our country. We've taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the constitutions of our state, and we are passionately committed to the democratic processes in this country.
Thanks, Tina. So maybe just our final question and to wrap up, which maybe is a little bit of a segue from your last point, your call to action there. So maybe if there was sort of one thing that you would suggest to our viewers who, aren't necessarily working as election officials, but want to sort of be supportive of our election officials, support their well-being, what is the one thing that a regular person could do to support our election officials?
Certainly, if they aren't able to serve as an election inspector, which I think 100% is, the best way for people to learn about the process, know about the process, and be able to defend the process, right? Because they've already lived it, they've already done it, so it's easy to defend. And a bishop at our church always used to say, a man with an experience is never at the mercy of a man with an argument. And so I think that anytime that you have somebody with an experience, they obviously are going to have a better argument than someone who is just arguing off of emotion. So get engaged, get involved if possible. If not, what I'm asking you to do is amplify truth, amplify messages that are coming out from your election official that is truthful information, and share that whenever you possibly can with whomever you possibly can. Put that on your social media accounts. Spreading the truth will help us defeat the lies.
Thank you, Tina. Everyone who is watching, please follow Tina's advice. That was great advice and a great call to action. We need poll workers, election inspectors, and we need people sharing the truth about our elections. Tina, thank you so much for joining us for this Elections Bites. Thank you to our audience for joining us. Join us next time when we'll be talking to Pam Fessler. We'll be talking to us about our election officials, what they do, and why it matters. Thank you so much.
Yes, you won't want to miss that. Pam's wonderful. Thank you, Avery.
Thank you.